Yeah, we're online. It's just for people watching, it's going to take 15 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
So now all the off-the-record conversations need to stop. I see the big live button.
And so then this link has been shared on
Yes.
on the Hangout. Cool. Just waiting for the first speaker. Where is the Google? What's the Google Plus link? Did you share it on the? Which is did Web someone share the link? Go ahead. Doug. What's your date in this thing? Sorry? Yeah, but you still usually see the viewers on it. Brian, have you shared it any time recently? Oh. Alrighty. All right. So I think we might as well kick off our second hangout. So this hangout is really kind of focused on startups and helping startups figure out how to hack conferences. I'm joined by a really wonderful entrepreneur who's built a company called Distil Networks. Rami, who's been to a number of our events. You're very welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So I'd love to just kind of just as kind of an opening question. I'd love to get a feel for what have you guys built? What's the product?
Sure. So with Distil, we help companies identify the difference between a real person and a computer program accessing their website. By blocking bots or managing your bot traffic, we can help you reduce theft, fraud, and improve the website security.
Fantastic. Great, cool. Yeah, so, I mean, I think for any startup attending a conference, and I've been in that position as well, just especially kind of my first conference or my second conference, either just attending or exhibiting or pitching, it can sometimes be, it's like a giant puzzle that you're trying to kind of figure out. I mean, being an entrepreneur, everything you're doing kind of for the first time, and I'm kind of wondering, just as a first question, why do you attend events? What do you see as the value as somebody building a company?
You can get a lot of things out of conferences. You can get new hires, you can get connections with investors, with potential customers, just general press exposure. All of those things are reasons to attend. And it really depends on your stage and what you're trying to accomplish. A conference is really, I think, what you make of it and what you want to get out of it, especially a massive general conference like Web Summit that concentrates on the internet as a whole and technology. You can accomplish any one of those goals or all of those goals all together by putting your mind out to it.
Sorry, we've got somebody talking in the background. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, so you arrive at a conference or even before a conference, what kind of preparation, especially as a startup in the earlier days? You guys have been incredibly successful over a short period of time, but in those very first days, when before you were going to a conference, what was the type of preparation you were doing to maximize your ROI and your time and your spend?
So there's a lot of things you can do ahead of time. The one thing I will say is don't overdo it. A lot of conferences are about serendipity. The things that you don't plan for, putting yourself in the right place in the right time and hustling to get there is where I've gotten the most value out of conferences. But there are several things that you should do ahead of time. Identify a couple key people that you want to meet. Reach out to them to schedule a time to meet with them. Prepare, get an understanding. If you're pitching, make sure your pitch is buttoned down. And if you're not pitching, identify who some people, some key members of the press are that you want to reach out to. There's a lot of people that are going to be in attendance, and just identifying a handful of people that you want to connect to is great.
And so in terms of reaching out, do you kind of some great kind of fun examples over the years of how you've tracked a journalist or an investor or another entrepreneur down? Do you use Twitter? Do you use email? What's your approach when you're doing it?
You know, the tool that I've had the most success with personally has been LinkedIn. Sending an invite, an email, a LinkedIn invite, and then a LinkedIn in-mail. Those are kind of a little two different things, but it puts you on their radar and just saying, hey, I'm going to be at this conference. I'd love to grab 30 minutes of your time. Do you have any availability on this day or this day? That's worked out well. Twitter's been pretty helpful day of. Twitter's more of a live in the moment type social network, and that's where if I'm at a conference, I'm seeing people tweeting about the conference that I'm at, then I'll follow them or I'll message at them because it's happening in the moment. And that's where I leverage Twitter.
And in terms of, say, investors specifically, who get a huge, deal with a huge number of kind of inbounds from startups, especially around the time of conferences, do you have any advice on how to try and either kind of grab their attention, maybe even how far in advance did you kind of reach out to these people?
With investors, my strategy, my personal strategy has been just get on their radar so that you're memorable, so you can follow up afterwards, right? I don't spend the time to try to pitch them because 100 people are pitching them that day. They're going to forget it as soon as they walk away. The bigger moment is try to find something memorable, some way that when you follow up in 2-3 days, that they're going to remember exactly who they are and they're going to take that call.
Okay. And then with journalists, I mean, is there, so thinking about the kind of the entirety of an event when you're on the ground at an event, we were just chatting before we went live about some of your experiences about the benefit of what happens during the day, and then sometimes what happens maybe in the evenings. Could you kind of talk to that, for example, in terms of how you might approach a conference, kind of as a 9 to 5 phenomenon, or something that goes on for longer?
Well, so there's two pieces to that, right? The journalist piece, they want news, right? So prepare news bites for them. Hey, we're about to launch X. We just accomplished Y. Make sure you have a handful of sound bites because that's what journalists are going to pay attention to. So have a handful of things ready ahead of the conference that are new, newsworthy, that they can latch onto to hand feed them. In terms of the conference itself, be ready for a 24/7 experience, especially a conference like Web Summit. I think you're going to get just as much, if not more, out of networking at night versus networking during the day. And so be prepared, be well rested, and have a game plan ready to maximize the efforts on both the daytime front and the nighttime front because, honestly, a lot of the best connections I've had happened over networking over beers because the guard is down, you can have a more meaningful conversation, and it's a lot more memorable unless you have a few too many beers.
So, I think it's pretty interesting. This is something Robert Scoble, he was just kind of obsessed with. This is really why well, in particular, why he goes to Web Summit. It's what happens late at night, and we kind of talked about one thing in particular, which was my experience with conferences, especially kind of earlier, a number of years ago when nobody really knew about this thing in Dublin. There's still a conference called Web Summit. I would try and track down the hotels that people tended to hang out at from about midnight onwards. So I found some of the most productive networking was from about midnight to 3 a.m. Why? Because many of maybe the key speakers or the key attendees have kind of obligations. Sometimes they might be at a certain dinner or a certain party, and then they all just kind of congregate in 2 or 3 key places into the early hours of the following day. So that's one of my little hacks is find that hotel, whether it's in Austin, Texas, whether it's in Dublin, Ireland, or anywhere else in the world. There's a whole lot of good networking that can be done kind of between 12 and 3. That's kind of my takeaway. So just
not to pander too much, Patty, but I gotta say, of all the conferences I've been to, Web Summit does a really, really great job of putting like-minded people together. The way that you group companies together, the way that you bring in investors into those groups of companies and media and bring that synergy together, it almost forces serendipity. And so, more than ever, more than any other conference, I think, when you go to Austin or when you go to a lot of other conferences, it can feel overwhelming because you're in a sea of just generality. At Web Summit, I think you're in a group of like-minded peers and people in the same stage as you, and I think that's what makes it even more important to network, because these are your exact people that you want to connect with.
Great, good. I'm glad. So I have a few quick questions. Business cards, yes or no?
You know, I think I personally still use them. I only use them as far as taking a picture of it and putting it into my CRM. But asking for a business card and having a business card, it gives you 2 data points. If you exchange emails, then you're still just getting an email. But if you have a business card, you get an email and a phone number all at once, and that ups your likelihood of being able to connect.
Do you have any strategies? I mean, if you're at a 3-day event or even a 2-day event, I mean, the number of business cards that you can accumulate over that period of time, do you have any strategies for trying to kind of tag them in a, you know, as you're putting them in your pockets or anything like that?
So I use a software called Full Contact. It takes a picture of it, they OCR it into my and sync it with all my contact information, and then I can tag it right then and there on the app. That's how I personally do it. You used to be able to use LinkedIn Card Munch, but they did away with that service. I know Evernote now can do that. Find some sort of digital tool, because if you just have a handful of business cards, you're never going to remember them. So make sure you write a note of how you met that person. It's very important to tag it. If you don't have some sort of tool on your phone, then at least write it on the business card, how you met them, so that when you're looking at it later, you remember. Because it's hard. You're right. You get a shit ton of cards, and that's an official measurement here in the U.S. And if you don't actually tag each one, then you'll lose track of them very, very quickly.
Okay, so Full Contact. We're big fans of Full Contact. They're actually coming. They'll be in Dublin in November as well.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm just wondering then, in terms of, so for lots of kind of startups that will be in Dublin, this will be one of their first times exhibiting. So it's a lot of, you know, very young, early stage startups. You've been through this a number of times, and I'm sure you've figured out what to do right. I'm just wondering, kind of looking back, what would you have done, or what would you encourage young kind of startups to do while they're exhibiting?
You know, the one thing that I see people mess up, and I don't understand why, is branding, right? Make sure you're dressed in a memorable company T-shirt. Make sure your co-founders are as well. Don't hire booth babes. For the love of God, please do not hire booth babes to join you. I think that's a terrible, terrible approach. But be memorable and have a lot of energy, smile. You'd be surprised about how many people just want to talk, and they're walking around mingling. The people that are going to stand out to them are the people that are going to be the friendliest. And I know it's overwhelming, a day or 2 or 3 meeting with hundreds, if not thousands of people, but just try to power through it, get a lot of caffeine, and you know, treat each person like a potential customer, even if they may not be, and just show them the product. And you know what? You have no idea who you're going to run into and what takeaways they're going to have about your product. Also, have a demo ready. Don't just try to explain what you do. Have a demo ready ahead of time, whether it's a video demo or you can show the live demo. Make sure you have something tangible that you can show each person that walks up.
So I think on the demo as well, a huge tip from my experience at other conferences exhibiting, and also our conferences, is that providing Wi-Fi for such an insane density of people, using like tons of devices, means that Wi-Fi reliability is just this is this thing that not even Apple can solve sometimes at their own conferences. So I would just encourage every startup that in the event that Wi-Fi goes down, they've already got a kind of a backup offline version of their product. So that would be my just a tiny piece of backup. Just a question that somebody has posed here, in terms of the number of days preparation you would do in advance of a conference, or the number of hours relative to the number of hours you'd spend at a conference. Do you have any kind of quick and fast kind of rules in terms of how much prep work you should do in advance of going to a conference?
You know, I prepare a week in advance for a conference. I don't spend, you know, months ahead of time. Because I go to, you know, early on we hustled so much. We went to any single conference that would give us a microphone, give us a speaking opportunity, give us anywhere. I would take a bus, a train, a plane, anywhere that would let us have some exposure. So there's only so much prep you can do. I say a week in advance is well enough, just so that you give people that you're trying to connect with a little heads up, a little forewarning, a little time to plan, and then that's it. Once you're 2-3 days out, you should be ready. You should have your business cards lined up. You should have your demo lined up, and you should just spend that time resting up and getting ready to go hard the next couple of days.
And do you have any advice in terms of boots on the ground? So you're an early stage startup, maybe exhibiting or going as a one-person brigade. Maybe you have to do it. Maybe that's not ideal. Maybe 2's the right number. Maybe 3's the right number. Maybe 4 is just too much of a stretch. I mean, there's probably no golden rule, but what's your take on it?
I always think that you feed off of your co-founders, and to the extent that you can bring your co-founders, right? If you're a single person in a startup, then bring maybe your number 2. But I think most of us start companies with other people, and bring all of the co-founders, because at the end of the day, this isn't just a networking opportunity or a business opportunity. This is actually a lot of fun. If you go in with the mindset that you're going to have some fun doing it, then you're going to actually love it, and it's going to help you bond with your co-founders. We look at this as our vacation just as much as it is a business opportunity. So, if I said to my co-founders they couldn't come, they'd probably hang me. And so bring your co-founders along, and I think it'll be a great opportunity both for you to feed off of each other, but also for you to bond together.
We have to create some type of word for a startup holiday, because startups, starting a company is kind of 365. It's just kind of constant. I haven't met many successful entrepreneurs who are like, well, I'd some days do a 4-day week, some days a 5-day week.
4-day week. Wow.
I don't think it works. So then in terms of kind of, if you were to kind of set kind of metrics, and you're kind of, you and 2 of your co-founders are coming to an event, and you're going to go, okay, guys, we're going to measure our ROI. We're obsessed with, say, OKRs or something. We just want kind of key results. What are the kind of what are the metrics that you would advise some young startups to kind of think about? Is it the number of business cards? Is it the number of face-to-face meetings? Is it the number of follow-ups? What's important to you in your view?
Well, so one thing that's important is to not always stick together. Divide and conquer helps you reach that much more of the conference. So even though you're coming with your co-founders, spend no more than half your time together, and the other half of the time apart, accomplishing your goals, whether it's networking or reaching out or exhibiting. You don't all 3 have to be at the booth at the same time. I'm a little unique in when I come to conferences, especially Web Summit, I look for that one magical moment. My takeaway is, what is that one connection that I wouldn't have ever come up with otherwise? What is that one thing, one output? Because that one output actually more than pays for itself. That one, that one investor connection, that one hire, that one business connection. That's all I look for. I look for that moment of serendipity, and that's how I measure the ROI. I don't try to get too granular with it.
And so I'm seeing just some people are posting some more questions. So I'm just wondering about, just to dig a little bit deeper on investors. So startups in most cases want to meet investors. But I'm wondering, how long does it take? Building a relationship and securing an investment. For many startups, they've no kind of idea maybe of how long that might take and what's involved. So you might meet an investor at a conference. How long does it take for that kind of relationship to gestate or to deliver something?
I've seen all sorts of things. For us, we love relationships, and our seed investor, it took us a year. We actually met them at a pitch competition. They were one of the judges. We spent 6 to 9 months wooing them and keeping them updated, and then they invested. So that's a perfect example of hustling, going to a pitch competition, meeting an investor. 9 months later, they led our $2.1 million round. Our Series A investor that we closed earlier this year of $10.5 million, I've known them for 2 to 3 years, and they said no to me several times before we kept giving them updates. So it could be years, but I've seen it turn around for others where you meet somebody, they get very excited about you, your space, and in a matter of a couple of months, make an investment. It really depends on your timing, your connections, and really your specific situation. I will say again, go into it with the idea of building a relationship. Don't try to go for the close. Build the relationship, and that'll serve you a lot more in the long run.
And in terms of building that relationship, do you have any kind of suggestions on how you kind of cultivate a meaningful relationship with somebody who might potentially invest in your idea or in your business?
You know what they're looking for is more data on an investment. Any investor is trying to understand your business better, and the more insight that you can give them, it's so that they can create a trend graph in their mind of where you're going as a trajectory. If you give them, monthly updates or updates every 2 months of whatever key metrics make sense to you, that'll help them draw a better picture together of how you're doing. So more data and sharing is really the way that I've been able to build strong relationships with investors.
Great. So I'm going to ask some people in the room in a moment if they have any questions. I'm going to come to you, Brian, in a second, because I'm sure lots of startups ask Brian kind of questions about exhibiting and about pitching and about attending in general. But another thing that I'm wondering about is a lot of kind of early stage startups sometimes fixate in coming to an event on investors and media, and that's the kind of only currency at the event. I'm just wondering, in your experience, have you found that building relationships with other entrepreneurs you find or other people at the conference are of equal or similar value to this kind of obsession with, I got to meet investors, I got to get in front of media? Are there other people worth meeting?
I mean, absolutely. I would actually say that your fellow entrepreneur is more important to me than the investors or the media. The investors or the media are flashes in the pan. They're one-time things. You're not going to get a long-term, meaningful relationship. No offense to the media or investors. You're just not out of them day to day. Your fellow entrepreneur, that could be a very meaningful long-term relationship. You can work off of each other. You can help each other grow or make introductions for each other in really meaningful ways. So I would say that that's an even more important connection to make. I've even actually seen some love connections come out of Web Summit. And so you never know what will happen.
We had our first Web Summit baby this year.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
That I know of, anyway. Brian,
Yeah,
do you have a question, or is it?
Put slightly on the spot, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of the questions that startups would ask have been kind of talked through this conversation. But in terms of kind of leaving a lasting impression on investors, on other journalists, on other startups and entrepreneurs, do you have any kind of takeaways on little things to do, like give them a little coin or something like that they'll remember you from?
Somebody gave me a coin last year on their business card, and I remember it, but it didn't really make any, because they were Egyptian and they put an Egyptian coin on there. It didn't really make a difference to me. I think the thing that's going to make a lasting impression is what makes you unique, right? It's not going to be a tchotchke that you give them. It's not going to be a toy or a gimmick that you give them. It's the soundbite. It's the 2 sentences about what you do and what makes you unique that's going to stand out in their mind, I think. And really nailing that. I mentioned earlier, have sound bites ready about things that you're doing in the future, upcoming things for the press, but also be sure to have nailed down why you're the right people to solve the problem that you're solving and why it's a huge problem that they should care about. And that's what they're going to remember.
So we've kind of covered a lot of stuff about kind of preparation, the amount of time you might put in beforehand, that you kind of start to do your reach out maybe a week before, that it's a good idea to try to get more boots on the ground, maybe 2 of your fellow co-founders or two other people from your company. It's good to split up and try and cover more ground. Don't think about a conference as something that's 9 to 5. Many of the most meaningful connections happen from 5 until early the next morning. I mentioned about sleep on the plane, so 3 or 4 hours a night sleep should really try and just get you through, and a lot of caffeine or something. A lot of caffeine. You'd be surprised how much coffee gets consumed at the Web Summit. So we've got a few minutes left, and I'm just wondering, you've done your preparation, you go to the conference, you meet lots of people, and now you're kind of back in your office. What's the kind of best kind of follow-up that you can do? And I'll preface that by just kind of asking, a few discrete questions to begin with. So, how long should you wait to do follow-up, for example? What should that follow-up look like? Should you follow people on social media? Is that a bit too creepy? Where do you draw? Where do you kind of draw the line? So these are just a whole range of questions that people will be approaching and asking for the first time when they leave Web Summit.
Okay, I'm gonna work backwards. Social media. Don't add me on Facebook. That is a little creepy, a little too forward. Twitter, I think, is totally fine, obviously, to follow, and saying, tweeting out at somebody. LinkedIn, I think, is totally fine as well. Facebook, a little much, to go that far. And so that's the social media aspect. How long you should wait? The way I think about it is, when are they getting home and when are they catching up on their backlog? Right? When we travel, everybody has a huge backlog of emails that pile up. I try to time it for as soon as they're finishing through their backlog. So I would say, okay, they're going to get home tomorrow, they're going to rest up a day and churning through their backlog the next day. So maybe 2 days after they get home, I'm going to email them so that it's top of inbox, it's not buried in a spam of other emails that they're just going to ignore. And the type of follow-up is, hey, this is who I was, and I'd love to talk further about X. If you met an investor, then I'd love to do a full demo of our product, and this is why we were special again, and try to tie it back to the conversation that you had. If you were able to make some sort of meaningful connection, make sure to loop that in. The one thing I would say is don't make it cumbersome. People are just catching up when they come back from a conference. So if you send me an email that is 3 or 4 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs long, I'm actually not going to read it. You'll lose me after a sentence. But if you keep it to 1 or 2 paragraphs, that's 2 or 3 sentences a piece, I'm going to glance through it and make it a very quick action item. Have one ask at the bottom of the email, a quick introduction, make sure that it's meaningful, get their attention right away, and make it easier on them. Don't add more work for them to do.
Fantastic. This is Rami. This has been absolutely fantastic and so incredibly helpful to get the perspectives of an entrepreneur on a conference. We all really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you in Dublin in 3 weeks' time. Thanks so much.
I'm very excited. Can't wait, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody there too.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.